important this morning. I think it's helpful if everyone would kind of understand a couple of things as we study. Number one is that names in the Bible, specifically in the ancient Near East, the Old Testament, were really a connectivity between the person and then their name. The character of the individual and their name, they always kind of went together, or at least that was the intention. And we don't really do that much anymore in Western culture, but even in the East these days, there still are cultures who do that, where kind of your name is what you're supposed to be, or your name is what you're supposed to accomplish. You think of the name Isaiah, for example, which means the salvation is of the Lord, or the name Jesus, Yeshua, is the Lord's salvation. So really you have these names where the name means something much more than today. My surname Wood, I have no attachment to it at all. I can't even use a saw. But somewhere back in my family line, likely up through Great Britain somewhere, there might have been somebody who was a woodworker or a woodsman, and he had the surname Wood, and it got passed down. And that would be the way to picture what often is happening when you're reading your Older Testament in the Bible when it comes to names. There's another thing that'll be helpful this morning to kind of have in place as we get into this, which is we talked about it 2 weeks ago, kind of the history or the context of what's happening in the time that Isaiah writes. Of course, we have Mr. No Faith, King Ahaz. And Mr. No Faith is starting to buy into the Assyrians and leaning on them instead of on Yahweh, instead of on God, and so God's going to judge Israel, specifically Judah at this point, and of course, there's a remnant of believers still there in Judah who God's going to talk to. And in Isaiah chapter 8, for example, he says, hey, listen, I'm going to judge. The Assyrians are going to take over. It is going to be a cloudy storm of thunder, of divine judgment. But on the other side of it, there is an answer. So I need you to hold on to my promises. Don't buy into the occult. Don't buy into the magic. Don't buy into the pagan rituals. Don't buy into these other religions. I need you to hold on to me, because on the other side of this judgment, there is a coming answer. And that's why, by the way, when you get to, for example, when you get to the Christmas story in Luke chapter 2 and in Luke chapter 1, you've got people like Zacharias. We've got people like his wife, Elisheba, Elizabeth, or Mary and Joseph, or Simeon and Anna. These are people who for 700 years at this point were holding on to that promise. Where God said, hold on and wait, because on the other side of the dark clouds, there is a breaking of the dawn. And so I need you to have all that in your mind as we step into this message today and are reminded that the answer and the solutions to all of life's issues, and what we're going to see this morning, the issues, is never a what, it is always a who. The answer to all life's issues is always the who. And so if you have your Bible, turn with me back to Isaiah, and let's look at chapter 9 this morning, kind of a very famous Christmas text, but let's look at it top to bottom and make sure we don't just skim over a couple words and sing fa la 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 and go home. I actually want you to see the context here, and as you turn to Isaiah 9, I want you to remember that Isaiah 8 is judgment. I mean, literally, it is the dark night for Judah, to the point that God actually tells Isaiah, hey, by the time your own son is 3, the Assyrians are going to storm through, and they're already in Damascus by 732, but they're coming all the way down, and you're going to be done. You guys are going to be decimated. There's going to be nothing left. And so Isaiah 8 is an absolutely dark chapter of judgment. And then we get to chapter 9, and there's this little glow, this glimpse of light that begins to leak through and peek through the clouds as we see a coming hope. And so if you're a note taker, go ahead and let's begin, number one, with the coming light in the darkness. And I'm going to give you 3 little coat hangers here and then a few applications. And so let's begin, number one, with the coming light in the darkness. Isaiah 9, verse 1. So after the judgment and the woes and the thunder clouds, Isaiah continues with his prophecy. And he says, but, you can already feel the turn. But there will be no more gloom for her, meaning Israel or Judah. There will be no more gloom for her who was in anguish. So for a period of time, she's gonna bemoan, she's gonna bewail, she's gonna be under assault. But then there will come a period of time where she will no longer be in her anguish, For in the earlier times, he, meaning God, treated the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. And it's important you understand there in the margin, just right in the region of Galilee, which for many of you who know the landmarks in the map of Israel will begin to understand the importance of that. So that's the region of Galilee. So he says there will be no more gloom for her who was in anguish. In earlier times, he treated the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali with contempt. She's under judgment. But later on, he, meaning God, shall make it glorious. By the way of the sea, on the other side of the Jordan, look at this closely and underline it, Galilee of the what? Of the Gentiles. Here you have 700 years before Jesus. Isaiah saying it's no longer going to be Galilee of the Jews. It's going to eventually be known as Galilee of the Gentiles, the place for which the world can find its hope. The place from which everyone can find its hope. Now, real quick right there, it's helpful to pull up a map of Israel. And so if you need to, you can go to the back of your Bible if you got a study Bible. But you got, Mount Hermon up here, and then you got the Golan Heights, and you come down into the region where the Sea of Galilee is, and then there's a fertile crescent and plain that runs down through the middle of the nation. And then you go up into those southern mountains where Jerusalem is and down into the Dead Sea. What he's talking about here is up in that kind of northeast quadrant, he says the Assyrians are going to come in. And they're going to invade from the northeast. And that region of Galilee is going to be decimated and destroyed. It's under judgment. It's the contempt of God for what they've done and their rejection of him. But he says there's coming a later day where that same region is going to out of it have an explosion of light, which will touch the world. And I would trust that everyone here immediately is a very initiated audience. Now, 2,700 years later, on the other side of progressive revelations, going, I think I got that. I think I know what he's talking about, right? There's going to be some thunderclouds, and there's going to be a storm, but on the other side of it are these messianic promises, and there is a breaking of the dawn. Look at verse 2. So the people who walk in darkness will see a great light. And those who live in a dark land, the light will shine on them. And so Galilee is going to become this glorious place because a light will explode from there. People will get to see this very important light. Now, you all know, again, 2,700 years later, on the other side of progressive revelation, everyone here knows about that light. It's one of the great themes of the New Testament, right? How many times have you been reading in the New Testament and you read light, 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 he came, he's the light, and you're going, why is there such a focus on light? Well, now you know. Because 700 years previous, there had been a promise about a coming light from Galilee. In fact, you remember the great Benedictus of Zacharias. Zacharias, kind of funny story. He's told by an angel, he's in the temple, he's a priest, and he's told that he's going to birth the baby. And he goes, no, I won't, I'm old. And so the angel says, no, you will. He says, no, I won't. So he actually is disciplined in a way. He's chastised and he's muted. He's not allowed to talk for 9 months until John the Baptist is about to be born, and he's born. And then you remember Zacharias holds up a little tablet and says, his name shall not be called Zacharias, like my family name. He's going to be called John. And everyone goes, huh? And then his mouth is freed. And he prophesies and explains why. And he says in his great speech, his great prophecy, Luke 1, verse 76, he says, you child, meaning John the Baptist, will be called the prophet of the Most High. For you will go before the Lord to prepare his ways because of the tender mercy of our God, with which the sunrise, the light from on high, shall visit us to shine upon those who sit in darkness and the shadow of death. And so right away in the Christmas story, you begin seeing these allusions to this coming light. In fact, if you would, turn with me real quick to Matthew. Keep your finger in Isaiah 9. Let me show you something in Matthew chapter 4. And this is important because Matthew provides the commentary for the Jewish reader, and he basically just lays it out. He says, hey, let me tell you what's happening here with Jesus. And we're now 30 years later. John the Baptist is in prison. Jesus is launching his ministry. And then by the time you get to Matthew 4, as Jesus is to begin to launch here, look what Matthew says about his launch from the regions of Galilee. Matthew 4, pick it up in verse 13. It says, Jesus, leaving Nazareth, where he grew up, he came and he settled in Capernaum. And if you get to go on the Israel trip with us, if the Lord should will, we'll go stand right where this happened. And we'll actually stand in Capernaum, which is by the sea in the region of, now if you have a pen, pull it out and underline, in the region of what? Zebulun and Naphtali. So actually, you just read that 700 years previous by Isaiah. Matthew commentates and says Jesus launches his ministry from Galilee, and then just to make sure there was no mistake about it, he finishes in verse 14 and says, this was to fulfill what was spoken through Isaiah the prophet. He says, this is the man. This is the light that was to come. That's why for many of you, when you've been reading through the book of John, and we'll get here in just a couple of weeks, we'll get into the book of John, you remember that famous moment at the Feast of Tabernacles where Jesus stands up, and finish it with me, he stands up at the Feast of Tabernacles and he says, you ready? I am the light of the world, right? Remember that? So here you have the Feast of Tabernacles where they would light these big oil lamps that would be glowing up into the night sky to the point that every suburb in Jerusalem, they said, was lit by them. And then the people would come, the men would come and they would dance and they would sing to Yahweh, and the women would sit in the court of the women and they would watch their husbands dance around, and they would sing. And they would sing to God, saying, God, you are the one who shined the Shekinah glory. You are the one that led us by the pillar cloud through the desert. Now please, send your Messiah, send your light. And it was at that particular ceremony that Jesus stands up in front of everybody. They grow silent, and he said, I am the Shekinah glory. I am the pillar cloud. I am the light of the world. Everything that you've been waiting for, the Messiah that you want to arrive, it is I. I am here. And of course, did they accept him? No, they didn't. They threw him out. That's what we're reading about here. So back in Isaiah chapter 9, pick it up in verse 3. The promises continue. He says, thou shalt multiply the nation. So not only is there going to be this crushing blow to the area of Galilee, not only is there going to then be a glowing light that comes out of Galilee, he says, also you will multiply the nation, and you shall increase their gladness, meaning Israel, and they will be glad in thy presence as with the gladness of harvest, as men rejoice when they divide the spoil. For thou shalt break the yoke of their burden and the staff of their oppressors, as at the battle of Midian. He pulls in the story of Gideon. Remember that story? 300 guys clank their pots, and then all the Midianites go fighting each other and running away. It's a supernatural victory is the point. And he says there's going to be something like that that's coming, a supernatural victory, a greater Gideon to come. In verse 5, and every boot of the booted warrior in the battle of tumult and the cloak rolled in blood will be burning, just fuel for fire. So what he's doing here, and you probably already can feel it, is he's now pointing ahead even further down the road. To a day when the Jewish nation is expanding, and they're going to be glad again in God's presence and not be oppressed anymore. And he uses Gideon's victory, the supernatural victory, as an illustration to say there's another one of those that will one day come, a supernatural victory whereby the nation of Israel will again be able to be a world empire and a world ruler. That's what he's talking about there. Now, you obviously would understand that what he's talking about is the return now of Christ. So at the beginning, he's talking about the first arrival of Christ, and now he's talking about the return of Christ, the battle of Armageddon. And what he's saying is that there's going to come a day where Israel's reach is going to be expanded, her territory expanded, and although right now she's been under 2,000 years of curse because she rejected the Messiah, there's going to come a day of national repentance. And in that day of national repentance, there's going to also be a day where Jesus splits the skies and he comes and he rules from the throne of David, and every single enemy who dares oppose him will be immediately vaporized. That's what he's talking about here. That's why he says even their boots will be nothing but fuel for fire. You can read more about it in Zechariah 12, 13, and 14, or Revelation chapter 19. It's all over the Bible, this return of the Lord in victory as he vanquishes his enemies with a flame that comes from his mouth, a sword, and he treads the winepress of the fierce wrath of God. And that's why this is important in our modern era right now with everything going on overseas, right? Have you ever wondered, why is it that everyone is always so concerned about this tiny little piece of desert called Israel? Why is it always an international crisis every 3 or 4 years? When the world powers are all concerned about what's happening about this tiny little parcel of desert the size of New Jersey. And here's your answer. Because it's the place on our planet that interdimensionally, in a way that we can't comprehend, God chose to come down the first time, and it's the place that God has chosen to come back down the second time, and Satan knows that, and he absolutely hates the idea of Jesus returning to this planet, and is trying to do everything he can to slow it down, to stop it, and oppose it. See, we often forget that the devil is smart, that he's trained, that he's historic, that he knows what the Bible says. And so you go, why in the world is there always a pushback on the nation of Israel and the recollection, the regathering of the Jewish people? Because Satan absolutely hates the idea of the world consummation and the return of Jesus. But then the obvious question comes up. You go, well, if you're a reader in the 6th century BC, you would go, well, then why or who is this guy? Who is this greater Gideon? Now, we all know. But park that for a second, okay? Go back 2,700 years. And they're going, well, who is this guy? Who's the supernatural ruler that's going to come? Who's this light that's going to glow out of Galilee? The greater Gideon's going to fix everything. Who is he? And that's why he goes on in verse 6, the famous Christmas passage. Here we go. And he actually answers for us. Look at it there, number 2, the coming light in the darkness. Number 2, the coming child of promise. You see it in verse 6? For a child will be born to us, and a son will be given to us. And that gets real Christmassy real quick, right? And very interesting here. This is important to kind of pause. What you have here, and I don't want to overstate it, but you can kind of sense it in the phrase, is you have an early reference here, a sneak peek, you ready? At the incarnation. A sneak peek at a child who is born with human descent. A child will be born to us, and a son will be given to us. So there's a sneak peek into the human nature. He's born of human parentage, but he's also a son that's given like a heavenly gift. And so early on, you get kind of a glimpse at what we call the hypostatic union, the 100% God-man. And that helps us to realize that Isaiah is a very theological man. It's very easy, I think, sometimes when we're reading the Bible, and maybe you don't do this, but I do, to kind of feel like the Old Testament is the appetizer, and then you get to John and Paul, and you kind of feel like now you get the main course. But what we see here is we have a prophet 2,700 years ago using phrasing that now we call the hypostatic union, 100% God-man, right? The immaculate conception or the virgin birth, right? And what you realize is that 1,000 years before the church ever sat in their little hollowed halls of monkish and scribal council, developing these beautiful terms, there was already a prophet who was penning the very foundation of them. This is a word that comes directly from the living God. And then he actually gives the name. Remember I said the name matters? Look at it in verse 6. And a child will be born to us, a son will be given. He's going to have a human parentage, but he's going to be begotten from above, and then his name, here's the name, will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, and Prince of Peace. And what you have here is you've got Isaiah trying as best he can to take a human pen and write about infinite realities. He says, I want to tell you who this light is that pops off the page, the map at Galilee. I want to tell you what he's like. He is a wonderful counselor, a mighty God, an eternal Father, and a Prince of Peace. In fact, we could even call him the greater Gideon. He says, here's what your greater Gideon is like. Here's what he does for you. And if you have your pen there, let's just go ahead and go through all 4 of these, and I'll put them on the screen for you. Ready? Number 1, here's what he's going to be like. He's going to be qualified to care for you. He's qualified for caring. That's why he begins with Wonderful Counselor, which in the Hebrew is a supernatural counselor. He's an otherworldly counselor. He's going to counsel you better than anyone ever could counsel you on planet Earth. You take the smartest 75-year-old counselor you can picture. Picture them. The wisest, most mature 75-year-old, then take all the 75-year-olds, put them all together in a room, take all the mysteries, take all the ministries, take all the knowledge that's ever existed, and this counselor is going to be able to give you more in the moment of your heartache, in the dark night of the soul, than all of them combined, because his wisdom predates all wisdom. He says that's who he is. Now, if you're in the room and you're going into Christmas and you're going through a hard time, a dark night of the soul, this is important because what you learn is your answer is not going to be in a what, it's always going to be in a who. In fact, I got a message just last week on Instagram from a family who lost their children. They were the youth group kids, and they were on their way to youth group for their Christmas party like we had last week, and a drunk driver hit the kids, 18, 15, and 13. Oldest son dead instantly, youngest son dead instantly. The middle child, 14-ish, name is Micah, is in a coma. Here's a mother, her name is Teresa. Literally in one night, she loses everything heading into Christmas. Now, when you're a pastor, and you're a friend or a family member, or you're Teresa, and you go to the hospital and you hear the doctor tell you that, what is it that keeps you upright? What allows you to continue to wake up another morning? What is it? It's not going to be the counsel of a psychiatrist. It's not going to be the counsel of a loving friend. It's going to be something else that sustains you in a much deeper way, right? And it's not a what, it's a who. It's the wonderful supernatural counselor. And there are some of you in the room who've experienced this. When you're at the very bottom of the barrel and you don't know how you're going to get up another day, there is something on the inside that compels you and comforts you and raises you up as all the truths of Scripture begin to pour into your mind. That is the eternal and wonderful counselor. Look at the next one. He says, not only is he qualified for caring, though, look at this one. He says, number 2, he's qualified, you ready, for saving. For saving. That's why he says he's a wonderful counselor, and he's also the mighty God. That's the El Gabor. That's the God warrior. That's what it means. That's the God hero. The idea here is he is so strong that he oversees heaven and hell. He oversees life and death. He oversees salvation and judgment. Now go ahead with me and just go into the New Testament and start thinking about all those phrases that Jesus used. He said, don't fear those who kill the body, but fear him who destroys body and soul. He said, I have the keys of death and Hades. He said, depart from me, you cursed one, into the hellfire prepared for the devil and his angels. Right? Every knee will bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. So literally, you have an early treatment of the reality that there is one who is going to oversee your entrance into heaven, and there is one who is going to oversee forever the judgments in hell, and his name, we'll get to in a moment. Here he's called the mighty God. Number 3, not only is he qualified for caring, he's qualified for saving. Look at this one, number 3. You ready? He's qualified for, I like this one, creating. For creating. He is the wonderful counselor. He is the mighty God. He is the eternal Father, which is a fascinating play on words because he just said he was an infant. So what he's saying is he's an infinite infant. He's not talking about the counsels of the Trinity here as Father. He's talking about from an earthly lens, he is the parent of time. He is the father of time. He's the father of life. He is the author of everything that we have ever had. He's saying that's the role that he has. He predates everything else. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 1 and 2. That's what he's talking about here, which, by the way, let's do a little homework. You guys love, some of you college kids are like, no, I'm off, man. Listen, let's do homework for next week. I'm going to give you ahead of time what I plan to preach on. I want to go into Hebrews 1, 1 and 2, and I'll bring all this down, the cookies down right to the center of this whole thing. But what I want you to do this week, if you would, is consider taking the whole week and studying how many allusions to Jesus, the second member of the Trinity, the light of the world, you can find in the Older Testament of the Bible. Now, I'm not just talking about all the prophecies, it's easy to find 100 or whatever those, and you can go on Google and cheat, but I'm not talking about that. I want you to creatively try to take this Hebrews 1 idea that God actually created the world through Jesus, the second member of the Trinity, and I want you to see how often you might be able to find him moving the timeline forward, moving the ball downfield in the Old Testament, okay? And I don't want to give it away, but I want you to think creatively here, intuitively. Who was it that was walking with Adam and Eve in the garden? You got to think that through. Who was it that met Abraham under the oaks of Mamre? Who was it that sat there and adjudicated whether Sodom and Gomorrah should go on another day? Who was it that met with Moses up on Mount Sinai and was hand-scribing the Ten Commandments? Who is that? And see how many allusions you can find creatively, and then when we come in next week, let's talk about that a little bit. It's a little bit of homework for you, okay? Because what you're going to find is that the answers in life, again, are not a what. Everything that you have, including your very nature and the fact that you breathe and draw another breath into your lungs right now, is all because of a who. Look at the last one. He's qualified for caring. He's qualified for saving. He's qualified for creating. Here's my favorite one. And he's qualified for ruling. Isaiah says he is going to be called the Prince of Peace, the wonderful counselor, the mighty God, the eternal Father, and the Prince of Peace, meaning he's going to be the ultimate king. There's going to be no more tyrants. There's going to be no more elections. There's going to be no more tax fraud, no more war. He's going to split the skies. He's going to vanquish evil. He's going to restore order, take the throne of David. He's literally going to vaporize his enemies, and he's going to set up a kingdom, a perfect kingdom of peace. I had a brother find me, I think it was 2 weeks ago, Isaiah 40 message, and he caught me, and his eyes kind of glossed over, and he said, hey, I don't have time to go into everything that's going on in our life right now, but I just wanted to say in regards to Isaiah 40 and how big our God is, he said, I just wanted you to know that this morning I needed that. And whenever someone does a quote, Mark, I think we all understand. We go, got it. And then I heard about a family in the church who this last week, their 7-year-old has a brain aneurysm that could be life-threatening and is at shock. And when one of our pastors went to visit, they brought up Job 1 and said, this week we just needed that. There are some of you in the room right now, and you are at a place in your life where all of the whats have let you down. They always will, by the way. The what of friendship, the what of family, the what of finances, the what of your home, the what of the economy, the what of your personal abilities and talents, the what of your materials, the what of your pride, the what of your ego, the what of your personal muscular strength, all the whats, even the what of the lineage and what you thought you were building in your home, all those whats have let you down, and you've reached everywhere for answers. Today you have to hear this. The only answer that will ever bring you lasting hope is not a what, it's always a who. It's a who. He is the wonderful counselor. He is the mighty God. He is the eternal Father. He is the Prince of Peace. And if you try to hold on to anything else in your life, you're constantly going to be let down. That's why for some of you who've tiptoed into the Christian world, and you walk around, you go, I think I like the Jesus thing, and then the rest of the weekend it's like, no, I'm still living my old life, and then you come back and you go, I think I'm going to play around with the Jesus thing, and then you go back to your old life. The reason that you find it's up and down is because this world will always let you down. But the wonderful counselor, the mighty God, the eternal Father, the Prince of Peace, he never will. Which is why, look at verse 7, he closes from the light that is coming in the darkness, from the coming child of promise to the coming reign. He talks about a coming reign of righteousness. He says, this King of kings, this wonderful counselor, supernatural counselor and mighty God, he's going to reign in. Look at verse 7. He just lays it out. He says, there's going to be no end to the increase of his government or of peace on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and righteousness from then on and forevermore. And then if you have a pen, just underline or circle that final word in verse 7. The zeal or the jealousy of the Lord of hosts will accomplish it. He's saying that's a unilateral promise, folks. But that's why he says zeal there. You know, what he's saying is that it literally is the jealousy of the Godhead itself, the pledge of the Godhead, the promise of the Godhead. Literally, the Godhead itself has committed to ensure that the wonderful Counselor, mighty God, eternal Father, Prince of Peace, takes the throne, and there is nothing the world, the flesh, or the devil can ever do to stop it. It's going to happen. Take it to the bank. So if you came into the room and you thought you were going to trust on your dainty little 5 seconds on the ball of dirt, you thought you were going to have enough mental power or enough physical strength to be able to get through and get answers, he says that's the furthest thing from the truth. There is only one who will forever rule, and he is I'm not going to give it away yet. I'm not going to give it away. Hopefully you haven't figured it out. No, hopefully you have figured it out. In fact, let's just do it, all right? Who is the wonderful Counselor? Who is the mighty God? Who is the eternal Father? Who is the Prince of Peace? I trust everyone in this room knows who he is because we live 2,700 years later on this side of progressive revelation and this side of the cross, and then the death and the burial and the resurrection. His name is Jesus. See, Jesus is the summation name of every other name that has ever been given him because it is the summation of his perfect character. It is the name above every name. It is the name by which and to which every knee will bow and tongue confess is Lord. That's why when you read the Bible and you see wonderful Counselor and mighty God and eternal Father and Prince of Peace and the Rock, Redeemer, Deliverer, Alpha, Omega, Lamb, Word, Water, Bread, it all points to Jesus. And he will forever be known as Yeshua, the Lord's salvation. That's who he is. He's all of it. That's why he's light of the world. You say, well, why is that a Merry Christmas message? Because we know the end. We know how it all ends. The Middle East imploding, Russia posturing, China finagling, Elon ideating, Joe Rogan bustling, Ben Shapiro commentating, DEI, CRT, LGBTQIA, Taylor Swift, Partridge in a Pear Tree. We know it ends with Jesus on the throne. The supernatural Counselor, the mighty God, the eternal Father, the Prince of Peace on the throne. And that's what makes for a Merry Christmas. It has nothing to do with a what. It has everything to do with a who. You know the cool thing about that is whether you lived in 700 BC or whether you lived in 200 AD, 1200 AD, or today, it doesn't matter what else is going on because Jesus is very soon going to be on the throne. That's a Merry Christmas. That's a real Merry Christmas. Amen.